Each dawn, they saw him, same battered field coat, same limp in his left leg, same pause by the perimeter fence near the mess hall where light never fully reached. He held a crumpled notebook in one hand, a folded American flag in the other. Recruits whispered names, Stray, Ghost Sergeant, Drifter, as he stopped for precisely 7 minutes to face the flagpole, lips barely moving as if reciting something only he could hear. No one asked who he was or why he came. He never begged, never spoke. Just walked away into the trees beyond the west gate. The guards stopped noticing. Base security flagged nothing. Some mornings were fog-choked, others bright with the clean sting of winter, but he was always there. Even in rain, even in ice. A myth in slow motion. Once, a new recruit had tried to approach. She'd made it halfway across the yard before a captain barked her back. "Don't disturb the ritual," he'd said. "Some ghosts serve longer tours." From the barracks, they watched. Some pretended not to care. Some saluted. A few left black coffee on the outer stone by the fence, which he never took but never moved. His presence was never acknowledged in briefing rooms, not in protocol nor passing mention. Yet each morning, the wind would lift just enough to carry a hush across the field as he arrived, boots worn to softness, coat hanging like memory on his shoulders. A silent rhythm formed, 7 minutes. Not 6, not 8. Not prayer, not grief. Just presence. Like he was waiting for something. Or someone. And then, just like that, he'd be gone again. Into the trees. He once had a name, Major David Kessler, leader of Task Force Lucent, an elite forward-deployed humanitarian security unit formed in late 2002 as part of a quiet initiative to secure civilian escape routes during the early stages of U.S. involvement in northern Iraq. His file, now buried deep under redacted pages and lost transmission logs, marked him as MIA as of March 21, 2003, during a failed exfiltration north of Dohuk. The truth was far more complicated. Lucent had been tasked with clearing and holding a narrow corridor between several rural villages and the Turkish border. On their 6th day, the unit encountered a surge of militia activity. Comms went dark. Air support was redirected. The evacuation window vanished. Satellite maps had been off by miles, and the civilians, nearly 50 of them, most women and children, had no way out. When command issued a final extraction order, Kessler refused. He had once said, during training rotations, "You don't leave a hill unfinished. And people are hills, too. You hold until they're safe." So he held. While others scrambled for airlifts, he and his remaining 8 soldiers located a forgotten smuggler's route, an old goat trail cut through ravines and dry creek beds. With enemy movement closing in from the east, Kessler led the convoy on foot, carrying children on his back, hauling injured elders over rocky slopes, rationing their last meal bars with field precision. He kept spirits up with quiet jokes. He showed the teenagers how to tie cloth over their shoes to mask their prints in the dust. He drew decoys in the dirt by moonlight, tricking pursuers. Over 5 nights, they walked through rain and silence. One soldier died of infection. Another went missing during a flanking scout. Kessler never recorded it. There was no time. At the Turkish border, he handed the civilians off to a Red Crescent team who promised safe passage. But crossing as a U.S. combatant was no longer an option, his unit's presence had never officially existed. The Turkish authorities denied his entry. His radio had no reach, his sat beacon had died, and his remaining men were presumed dead. When Kessler turned back into the mountains, no one followed. He had no map, no plan, and no real belief that anyone was still looking. Back home, reports came thin and confused. Lucent's last known location was marked hostile. Rescue was deemed too risky. One line in the mission log simply read, "No survivors confirmed. All units presumed lost." In Fort Bartley, a notice board had carried his photo for a month. Then it was taken down. When he returned, 5 months later, he looked nothing like the man in the photo. He was 37 pounds lighter. His uniform was shredded and stitched with mismatched patches. His dog tags were gone. He had walked, hitchhiked, and smuggled his way through 3 countries before finally landing in Berlin, New Hampshire, where no one remembered his name. He left no forwarding address. The army didn't know where to place him. Without a working ID, discharge papers, or living next of kin, the bureaucratic machine simply stopped. The house he once owned had been foreclosed during his absence. His wife, believing the reports, had moved on, remarried. The letters he sent, typed from public libraries in 4 states, were returned unopened. Kessler became a non-person. He never contested it. He wandered for years, working short stints under fake names. Maintenance jobs. Night shifts. Soup kitchens. But there was a gravity to him. People noticed, briefly, and then looked away. He didn't drink. He didn't complain. He never told his story, though sometimes he scribbled in a small notebook filled with names and symbols that no one else could read. In 2009, he stood outside Fort Atkinson, Kansas, for 3 days straight, leaving only when the MP warned him off. In 2013, someone spotted him at a memorial in Arlington, but the footage was grainy, the timestamp unclear. Then silence again. It wasn't until 2020 that he found his way to Fort Bartley, the original training ground where he had first earned his bars. A place that still raised the same flag at dawn, played the same trumpet call, and trained the same kind of young, half-scared, half-ready soldiers who reminded him of the ones he'd lost. He didn't try to go in. He didn't knock on the gate. Instead, he stood at the fence each morning, just outside camera range, just past the blind spot in the western perimeter where only the mess hall staff might catch a glimpse. He carried that same folded flag, worn but intact, and a notebook he never opened while standing. 7 minutes. Every single day. And when he turned to leave, the look on his face was neither anger nor regret. It was something else, something harder to name. Like a man returning to a promise no one else remembered. Like a vow kept in silence, long after the world had turned the page. He became a fixture, part myth, part inconvenience. The enlisted stopped pointing. The veterans just nodded and walked on. He was there every morning like the rising sun, just beyond the jurisdiction of command, just outside the responsibilities of paperwork. No one was assigned to handle him because officially, he didn't exist. His name raised no alerts. His face matched no file. His presence was persistent, but unthreatening. There were no confrontations. No speeches. Only those 7 minutes, and then the silent retreat. In the security office, base camera logs showed the same frame every day. Him, standing in profile, angled just slightly toward the flagpole as if aligning some inner compass. A few junior officers joked about the Bartley Sentinel. Memes circulated among cadets, grainy screenshots with captions like, "Even ghosts respect reveille." To most, he was harmless eccentricity. Just a man too stubborn to fade. But not everyone laughed. Corporal Mila Trask, assigned to perimeter review, noted the consistency of his visits. Same time. Same stance. She filed an informal report suggesting further investigation, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. It went nowhere. A lieutenant told her, "We don't waste resources on phantoms." When she asked who he might be, the officer shrugged. Some wannabe. Retired. Probably senile. Mila wasn't convinced. She noticed the way he moved, not the limp, but the discipline beneath it. The way he stood, not slouched like a drifter, but squared and measured, like a man still holding formation even after the formation forgot him. And the notebook. Always that same tattered book, held not casually, but like a relic. She tried once to approach, only to be redirected by her supervisor. He's not our problem. Let him be. The culture at Fort Bartley had changed. It wasn't war era anymore. New recruits came in waves, digitally trained, tactically sharp, emotionally detached. They memorized protocols faster than they understood them. War was theory to them. Distant. Sanitized. Kessler's presence, whatever he represented, was too inconvenient to explain. Rumors grew. Some said he'd been court-martialed and returned in shame. Others claimed he was a former enemy combatant pretending to be one of their own. The more outlandish theories included deserter, war criminal, deep state asset gone rogue. But none of it added up. There were no records. No confrontations. No demands. Just presence. Over time, his daily visits became background noise. MPs marked him as a non-interference civilian. One base commander signed an internal memo officially categorizing him as passively tolerated, meaning no personnel were to engage unless provoked. A bureaucratic label for a human shadow. But the injustice wasn't just in the silence. It was in the erasure. Inside the archives building, 3 floors beneath the main hall, sat the old microfiche reels of classified missions. Operation Lucent was one of them, sealed under clearance no one now had reason to access. Over time, clerical reshuffles and digitization errors scrubbed Kessler's existence further. His discharge status remained unresolved. His decorations were never formally retired. His last known pay log showed deductions for a mortgage that hadn't existed in 16 years. There was no one left in the system to ask where he'd gone, because officially, he never came back. In the base's museum annex, built to honor the legacy of service, Task Force Lucent was not mentioned. Its commendations, awarded posthumously to presumed fallen units, had been folded into broader campaign citations. Kessler's name appeared once, misspelled, on a digital display that had long since been retired after the server failed. No plaque. No mention. And yet, he kept coming. The injustice didn't harden him. It didn't turn to rage. It settled in him like silt, layered but quiet. He watched the base like a gardener watches a plot he once tilled but no longer owns. He never intruded. Never made himself a problem. He didn't need to. His presence was the problem, a reminder that something had been forgotten that should not have been. Some of the younger cadets started leaving offerings. A paper cup of coffee. A folded note. Once, a child visiting on family day slipped through the fence and handed him a drawing, stick figures holding hands beneath an American flag. Kessler had knelt, said thank you, and tucked the picture into his coat pocket without another word. One evening, a captain reviewing drone footage of the base's outer perimeter noticed something odd. On the ridge beyond the trees, someone had cleared brush into a pattern. A spiral. From the ground, invisible. From above, unmistakable. A perfect 7-ring coil, measured precisely, like a marker for something unseen. When he asked his team who did it, no one knew. The next morning, it was gone. Covered again with leaves, as if wind had never touched it. No one could pin the moment it began to change. Maybe it was when an instructor, ex-Delta, stopped mid-speech during a leadership drill and said, "Some of you still think rank earns respect. It doesn't. Showing up when no one asks you to, that's leadership." He nodded toward the fence. The cadets fell silent. Maybe it was when Trask, now a sergeant, started training her unit in the old field formation Kessler once used, something she'd researched on her own after finally digging up a brief mention of Operation Lucent on an archived defense forum. Maybe it was just time. But what began as mockery became reverence. Unspoken. Undefined. But very, very real. The morning General Ariana Chen arrived at Fort Bartley. The fog was still heavy across the drill fields, and reveille had just finished echoing through the loudspeakers. Her convoy was small, 3 vehicles, minimal escort. It was meant to be a quiet inspection, part of her new command rotation as Joint Operations Commander, but her presence alone carried weight. She had a reputation, sharp, composed, relentless in detail. Officers straightened when she walked past. No one spoke unless invited. As her boots touched the asphalt of the operations lot, she paused. Something in the air made her stop, a subtle pull, like a chord struck somewhere behind her that only she could hear. She turned her head, slowly, toward the west fence line, where a cluster of mess hall steam vents rose through the mist. There, motionless as stone, stood the man. Same coat. Same folded flag. Same exact stance. Her aide started to say something, but she raised one hand to silence him. Her eyes were locked, narrowing not in suspicion, but recognition. Memory began clawing its way forward, pushing through years of silence, through names and signal logs and unfinished reports buried in some defense archive that no one had touched in decades. She took one step forward. Then another. The base seemed to fall quiet around her. 17 years earlier, she'd been a field analyst, young, newly assigned, tucked inside a dusty intelligence outpost outside Mosul. Her job had been to intercept and decode encrypted transmissions from classified field units. Operation Lucent was one of them. She remembered the call sign, Rook 7. A voice steady in chaos, often relaying over hijacked frequencies. That voice had stayed with her. Not because of the words, but the tone, a calm, exact cadence, like someone stitching order into panic. One message had arrived at 0314 hours on the night Lucent went dark. Civilians secure. Route compromised. Last push begins now. No return expected. Hold us in mind. She'd never forgotten that phrase. Hold us in mind. She'd written it down in the corner of her notebook, circled it. And then the channel went dead. For 17 years. And yet here he was. She crossed the lot without a word to her team. The MPs didn't move. They didn't need to. Something in her posture said, let her go. As she reached the edge of the perimeter, the man turned, not startled, not defensive. Just aware. His eyes found hers, and for a brief second, it was as if no time had passed. Major Kessler, she said, her voice steady but softened by something breaking inside her. He blinked, slow and deliberate. You remember. She nodded. I never stopped wondering. The notebook in his hand, aged and stained by years of weather, hung low at his side. She recognized it, not the content, but the weight of it. The way he held it like memory. She reached out slightly, not touching him, but offering acknowledgement. She saw now the depth of wear on his coat, the careful patching of seams, the scars that crept from beneath his collar. Why this place? She asked, quietly. He turned his head slightly toward the flagpole. Started here. Everything. Thought it right to finish where it began. Her jaw tightened. She took one slow breath and stood at attention. No ceremony. No audience. Just her and the man history had forgotten. And then, without hesitation, she saluted, flawlessly, fully, eyes forward. A salute not to rank or protocol, but to presence. To survival. He straightened. Returned it. I should have come sooner, she whispered. You came, he answered. That's enough. A young cadet, watching from the distance, snapped a photo on instinct. Not for glory, not for posts. Just to remember what it looked like when silence finally cracked. Then Chin did something that would echo through command channels for weeks. She stepped past the fence line, opened the small gate usually reserved for supply carts, and walked around to his side. Walk with me, she asked. He hesitated. Then nodded. For the first time in 17 years, David R. Kessler crossed back onto base grounds. The two walked in silence at first, her stride matching his limp without pity. As they neared the training field, a low hush settled across the recruits. A few instructors stopped speaking mid-sentence. People looked up. Conversations faltered. They didn't know who he was, not yet, but they understood this was different. Something sacred. Chen led him not to her office, but to the memorial wall, a quiet place where names of the fallen were etched in black stone, facing east. She stood there with him, both of them still. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "After you went dark, I wrote this," she said. "I didn't know where to send it, so I kept it. I don't know if it matters anymore." He took the note with hands that shook just slightly. "Read it." Folded it again and returned it to her. "It matters," he said. "Not to history. But to me." She offered him something next: discretionary quarters, medical care, legal aid, reinstatement. He declined them all. "Not yet," he said. "There's still something I need to finish." "What's that?" she asked. He looked out across the field. The flag had finished rising. The sun was higher now, casting full light across the mess hall and the yard beyond. "I've been walking," he said. 17 years. One step a day. I just wanted someone to notice the trail." Chen exhaled slowly. "We noticed," she said. "We just didn't know what we were seeing." It began with a single gesture, General Chen's salute. What followed was not planned, not choreographed by a press team or authorized by the Department of Defense. It was something else, organic, reverent, deeply human. When she turned from Kessler and motioned for the gate to be opened, no one hesitated. The West Guard station, long used only for utility crews, slid open without a request. The rusted lock, untouched in years, gave way with a groan like old bones. He stepped forward. It was small, that first step. Measured, uncertain, his limp more pronounced now after years on foot and cold ground. But as his boot crossed the invisible threshold between myth and memory, something shifted. The murmurs died. The base itself seemed to hold its breath. He passed the fence line like a man entering sacred ground, not because he was above it, but because he had never truly left it. Chen walked beside him, not leading, not guiding. Matching pace. A dozen cadets watched from the far end of the yard, standing silently, caught between awe and confusion. A few officers emerged from nearby buildings, faces slack with recognition not of the man, but of the moment. Even those who had mocked the ghost sergeant felt something dislodge inside them. A weight. A reckoning. By the time they reached the central path, the silence had turned solemn. Major Kessler paused before the main flagpole. He faced it fully now, for the first time not separated by distance or time. His arm rose, not crisp and snappy like drill manuals prescribe, but slow, deliberate, with every tendon strained by years of weather and weight. Still, it was flawless. A salute held with quiet authority. Chen stood beside him and matched it, her own fingers trembling ever so slightly. A captain emerged from the administration wing. He was older, silver-haired, and had served during the years of Lucent's disappearance. His eyes went wide when he saw the man standing there. Without speaking, he saluted too. And then another. And another. A lieutenant jogged from the eastern barracks and joined the silent tribute. The line grew, uniformed men and women in various states of readiness stopping where they were, turning toward the flag, and raising their hands. Kessler's hand lowered at last, and his voice, rare, gravel-worn, broke the stillness. "I finished the walk," he said. "Just took the long way home." No one replied. Not out of disrespect, but because nothing else needed to be said. General Chen nodded. "Let's get you inside." They walked together toward the old debriefing wing. As they passed the central quad, the cadets parted without being told. Someone, perhaps Jensen, removed their cap and held it to their chest. Others followed suit. Chen led him to the only place that seemed fitting, the decommissioned officer lounge, long unused. The key still worked. Dust motes swirled in sunlight across leather chairs that hadn't held anyone in years. She pulled one out. He didn't sit. "I'm not staying," he said quietly. "You should," she replied. "This place owes you more than space." He looked at her, not with resistance, but weariness. "I didn't come back for honors." "I know." She opened a manila folder, thick, creased, yellowed at the edges, and slid it across the table. "Your reinstatement paperwork. We traced your last orders, reconstructed the mission logs from surviving codebooks. It wasn't easy. They tried to bury the whole thing." He flipped it open and scanned the first page. His name. His rank. A date. His mouth twitched, half a smile, half disbelief. "Posthumous, huh?" She winced. "Technically. But we've corrected that." He leaned forward and took a pen from her lapel pocket. "Signed it." Closed the folder. "That's it?" she asked. He nodded. "That's it." But it wasn't. Not really. Word moved faster than official channels could contain. Veterans groups began piecing together their own timeline of Lucent's final days. Journalists made quiet calls. A retired sergeant posted a thread titled, "I knew Rook 7, recounting a transmission that had held his unit in place long enough for an evac chopper to land. Others followed. Each story incomplete, but together, forming something undeniable. The Pentagon released a single statement confirming the official reinstatement and correction of records for a U.S. Army officer previously listed MIA. No name. No backstory. But they didn't need to say it. Everyone already knew. Major Kessler had returned. The soldiers at Fort Bartley began talking differently. Ghost became Sir. The fence line, once used for smoke breaks and shortcuts, became quiet. Cadets stopped walking through it without pausing first. The field where Kessler had stood became a place of hush, of thought. You didn't go there. You approached it. With intention. At night, Jensen, a third-gen Army kid, wrote in his journal, "I didn't know history could be alive. But I saw it today. It walks slower now. But it still walks." Kessler declined housing. Declined a parade. But he accepted one thing, a place to sit near the training fields, where he could listen and sometimes speak. A space between myths and manuals. Where recruits came not to be told what war was, but to learn why people still return to its borders. Every Sunday, he stood by the fence again. Not because he had to. Because some walks never truly end. The ceremony wasn't televised. No marching band, no 21-gun salute. General Chen insisted on keeping it private, by Kessler's request. It took place in a shaded corner of Arlington National Cemetery, under the kind of old oak that had outlived more wars than most officers. The plaque was modest. Bronze. It read, Major David R. Kessler. Task Force Lucent. Honor sustained in silence. Returned, remembered. No speeches were given. No medals were pinned to his chest in front of reporters. Only a quiet reinstatement, signed off by the Secretary of Defense, under seal, and a retroactive awarding of the Distinguished Service Cross, accompanied by posthumous honors for the men lost under his command. Their names, now verified and cross-referenced, had also been engraved on the stone beside his. Word spread. Not through press releases, but through the network of soldiers who'd once served with nothing but hope in their packs. Through forums, encrypted chat rooms, and handwritten letters slipped into lockers. Through Chen's own decision to speak, carefully, to the Joint Chiefs in closed session. She didn't ask for applause. She simply said, We forgot one of our own. He never asked to be remembered, but we don't deserve to forget. Meanwhile, back at Fort Bartley, something shifted. The cadet who'd snapped the photo of Chen's salute, Private Jensen, had posted it quietly to a group chat with the caption, "Some walks don't end at the gate." By morning, it was everywhere. No one knew how it leaked beyond the base. It didn't matter. The image, a grainy still of General Chen, hand raised in salute before the tattered figure of Major Kessler, circulated through veteran networks, military subreddits, and finally into broader channels. It sparked threads filled with stories, men and women posting about leaders who'd vanished, who'd gone missing in systems that couldn't, or wouldn't, account for them. People began referring to Kessler as the 7-minute sentinel. For many, he wasn't just a man. He was proof of something they feared they'd imagined, that quiet duty still had weight. In response, Fort Bartley did something no one expected. They installed a small bronze plaque at the western fence line, embedded into the stone where Kessler had stood for all those years. It read, "For 7 minutes each morning, a man stood alone. Not in protest. Not in anger. In duty. We see him now." Next to it was placed a bench. Not a polished monument, but a plain wooden seat. Recruits began sitting there before dawn. Sometimes alone. Sometimes in pairs. Occasionally, a new cadet would bring a thermos of coffee and leave it beside the stone. No one told them to. No one enforced it. It just happened. And then came the Sunday. By quiet arrangement, Kessler was offered a small office just off the training yard, unused for years, once designated for visiting instructors. He accepted. Not for lodging, not for honors. Just a desk, a window, and a door left open during daylight. Inside, he hung no certificates. No medals. Just one map, an old, faded printout of northern Iraq with markings in faded red ink. Routes, waypoints, a path cut through dust and time. Under it, he kept a single wooden box with the names of every civilian he'd led out of that war zone. Written in his own hand. Each week, he began receiving visitors. Not commanders or journalists, but recruits, some sent by curious instructors, others who came on their own. He never spoke much. Instead, he asked one question. Describe the people you want to lead. Most stumbled at first. They'd talk about missions, or discipline, or tactical edge. But he would gently interrupt. Not how. Who. They would sit, think, try again. Some came back. Some didn't. He didn't keep track. Chen visited once a month. She brought no entourage. Just a small folder, always placed on his desk without a word. Updates, requests, questions about doctrine. He would skim, make a few notes, and slide it back across the desk. Their conversations were short, often ending in silence, but the kind of silence shared between people who no longer need to explain themselves. In time, other bases took notice. A program quietly began forming, modeled not on Kessler's tactics, but his presence. A course module titled, Enduring Command, was piloted at 3 academies. One of the lessons was entirely unspoken, a 7-minute stand at an empty field, in full uniform, facing nothing. No instructor. No orders. Just time to remember. No one could quite articulate what they were remembering. But no one dared skip it. And still, every Sunday morning, Kessler returned to that same spot by the fence. Now with the plaque. Now with a bench. He arrived at the same time, stood for the same 7 minutes, facing the flag. No audience. No deviation. Even in snow, even in summer heat. It wasn't ritual anymore. It was legacy. And through it, recruits learned something they couldn't find in manuals or war games, that some missions are not briefed or documented, that some acts of leadership have no end date, and that presence is its own form of command. They learn that service doesn't always wear stripes. Sometimes, it wears silence. He remained.